Now, in measuring backlash, backlash is a case where when one shaft is held firm, not turning, how much can the other shaft turn before it starts to turn the other shaft? Usually you measure off the bigger shaft. It's easier to measure for the amount of actually backlash, in other words, slop and mating. You want to have some in there for thermal expansion so it doesn't be overly tight. Now, for calculation of allowable system, we use basically in your text, page 59, formula for pitch gears and allowable backlash. For our system here, this is about a 4-inch, in fact we can measure it, about a 4-inch sheath. 1, 2, 3, about 4 inches. And on your chart, from up to 5 inches for center distance on pitch, we go about 0.005 to 0.015. In other words, from 5 to 15 thousandths of an inch. Now we can use what's called the direct method, which is to take a dial indicator, turn vertically, as vertical as possible, and set the button in between the teeth. Now, setting the button, we try to actually, most dial indicators can go a complete cycle around. You see from this dial, get a good view here. If I push the button, it can pretty much go the entire one revolution, a little bit more than one revolution, but that's it. So we want to ideally be about half a revolution in pushing the button down. So normally we would set this up to be in between the teeth, as flat as possible, and that isn't always the easiest thing to do. Set in between on a base, somewhat pushed in but not all the way. And the idea of not all the way is to sit with the button riding as much as possible in the middle teeth. That's about the middle tooth there. I actually try to set it up a little bit higher than that. And then I attempt to zero the meter, zero the dial. And when I zero it, I'm holding the one shaft still. I move this slightly back and forth. I go clockwise, I get one reading. I go counterclockwise, I get another reading, and subtract the two difference. Like from this reading will be at 82. And without moving this other shaft, go from 90 to 82. Subtracting 82 from 90, it actually goes 8 thousandths of an inch. 8 thousandths of an inch fits well within the 5 to 15 thousandths of an inch. So there's enough backlash, but not too much. If there were too much backlash, these would probably be too far apart and would need to be brought back together, which means loosening, which would mean loosening these bolts off the 12-inch shaft and moving the 12-inch shaft closer in. If it was not enough backlash, it's too tight, and I would loosen these 4 bolts and move it slightly back. That's how we measure in what's called the direct measure method. The indirect method would actually involve tying onto the shaft like a C-clamp and a long lever arm. That would increase the amount of deflection. It's easier to measure that way, but you would need a clamp that's very tight that would hold a lever arm that would be able to operate the dial indicator at a distance. But that's how we go ahead and measure our backlash. Again, the idea is that the button fits in between the teeth. We clear the indicator with the teeth, and we work the shaft back and forth, preferably from pony brake without turning the shaft. And that's about 8 mils, 8/1000 of an inch on the indicator. Our next step now is to marry the motor with the driven. I'll proceed to do that next.